I stood in the corner of Ben's new Charlotte townhouse, a glass of cheap Merlot in my hand, watching the crowd mingle under the glow of string lights. The place was all sharp angles and polished floors, a real estate agent's dream, Ben's dream, I suppose. My brother always had a knack for selling things, whether it was a house or a story. Tonight, though, the air felt heavy, like the humidity that clings to you in a North Carolina summer. Grandpa Amos had been gone 4 days, and the ache of his absence sat in my chest like a stone. I'm Merida Wilson, 30, a freelance writer scraping by in Asheville, where the mountains feel like home and the rent's just shy of impossible. I've never been one for crowds, but I came to Ben's housewarming because family shows up, right? Even when you'd rather be curled up with a notebook and a view of the Blue Ridge. Ben, my older brother by 4 years, was in his element, charming the guests with that wide grin of his, the one that could sell sand in a desert. His fiancée, Lila, hovered nearby, her laugh bright as she chatted with our cousin Maggie. Our parents, divorced but civil, stood on opposite sides of the room, Mom fussing over the charcuterie board, Dad inspecting a framed photo of Ben's latest property deal. Then Ben raised his glass, the clink of metal against crystal cutting through the chatter. I'd like to make a toast, he called, his voice carrying that practiced confidence. Everyone turned, and I caught the glint in his eyes, the same look he'd get as a kid when he was about to steal the last slice of pie. To new beginnings, new homes, and to Grandpa Amos's memory. The room fell quiet, a respectful hush for the man who'd been the glue of our family. I raised my glass, my throat tight, picturing Amos on the porch of his Lake Lure cabin, his baseball cap tilted low as he whittled a piece of cedar. Speaking of Grandpa, Ben went on, setting his drink down with a flourish. I have an announcement. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, its edges worn like it had been carried too long. My stomach twisted. Something about the way he glanced at me, quick and sharp, set my nerves on edge. Before he passed, Grandpa gave me this letter, Ben said, his voice loud enough to fill the room. He wanted me to have his vacation home on Lake Lure, the place we all loved as kids. The room erupted in murmurs, congratulations rippling through the crowd. Mom beamed, Dad nodded proudly, and Lila clapped like she'd just won a raffle. Maggie caught my eye from across the room, her brow furrowed. She knew how much time I'd spent at that cabin, how many weekends I'd driven up to help Amos patch the roof or sand the porch swing. The cabin wasn't just a house, it was where I'd learned to plane wood, where Amos had told me stories of his life, his love for Grandma before she passed, his quiet lessons about finding peace in the small things. Ben, though? He'd been there maybe twice in the last 5 years, always griping about the spotty cell service or the lack of nightlife. I stood frozen, the wineglass cold against my palm. 3 weeks ago, Amos had handed me a wooden box, his old cigar box, the cedar still fragrant. Don't open this until the time's right, Merida, he'd said, his eyes crinkling with that knowing look. Inside was a notarized deed, signed and dated, transferring the cabin to me. It was mine, legally, already. Not part of his estate, not up for debate. So what was Ben holding? Was he lying? Had Amos changed his mind without telling me? My heart pounded as Ben unfolded the letter and started reading, his voice full of false reverence. I forced a smile, muttered, "Good for you, Ben," and excused myself to the bathroom, my mind racing like the wind over Lake Lure. I slipped into the bathroom, the door clicking shut behind me, and leaned against the cool tile wall. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, shaken, like I'd just seen a ghost. Maybe I had Ben's announcement felt like it had conjured something unreal, a betrayal of the sanctuary Grandpa Amos and I had built together. I pulled out my phone, my hands unsteady, and saw a text from Maggie. "You okay?" That was weird. Ben never cared about the cabin. She was right. Ben had always treated Lake Lure like an inconvenience, a rustic relic he'd rather trade for a condo in uptown Charlotte. I texted back, "Need to check something at home. Can you cover?" "Say I got a work call." Maggie, bless her, didn't ask questions. Within minutes, she'd spun a story to the family, and I was out the back door, the hum of the party fading as I climbed into my beat-up Subaru. The drive to my Asheville apartment was a blur, streetlights smearing like stars through the windshield. Memories of the cabin flooded me, Amos teaching me to cast a fishing line off the dock, his rough hands steadying mine. The two of us laughing as I fumbled with a hammer, trying to fix a loose shutter, the way he'd point out Orion's belt in the night sky. His voice low and warm. That cabin was more than wood and nails. It was where I'd found myself, where Amos had shown me how to mend things, not just furniture, but the broken parts inside you. Ben, though, had never cared for it. He'd show up for a day, maybe, rolling his eyes at the lack of Wi-Fi, itching to get back to his deals and his city life. The cabin was too slow for him, too quiet. So why claim it now? I thought of the letter he'd waved around, the signature he'd read aloud. Amos's handwriting had turned shaky in his last years, arthritis curling his fingers like old roots. But that signature Ben showed? It looked too smooth, too perfect. My gut churned. Was he desperate enough to forge it? I pulled into my apartment complex, the gravel crunching under my tires, and ran upstairs. The wooden box was in my closet, tucked behind a stack of notebooks. Its cedar scent hit me like a memory, sharp and alive. Amos had given it to me 3 weeks before he passed, his voice serious but kind. "This is for when you need to know the truth, Merida," he'd said. I hadn't opened it yet, honoring his request, but now felt like the time. My hands shook as I lifted the lid of Grandpa Amos's cigar box, the cedar scent wrapping around me like a hug. Inside, neatly folded, were documents, a sealed envelope with my name in Amos's wobbly script, and a small brass key I knew unlocked the roll-top desk in the cabin study. I unfolded the top document, my breath catching. It was the notarized deed, dated 6 months ago, transferring the Lake Lure cabin to me, Merida Wilson, in black and white, signed by Amos and witnessed by his lawyer, Harold Thompson. My eyes stung. He'd done this while he was still alive, making sure the cabin was mine, no questions asked. I opened the envelope next, pulling out a letter in Amos's unmistakable handwriting, each letter uneven but deliberate. "My dearest Merida," it began, "by the time you read this, I'll likely be gone. I've given you the cabin because you love it like I do, its creaky floors, its view of the lake, its quiet. You've poured your heart into it, and I trust you to keep its spirit alive." My throat tightened as I read on. I know Ben might not take this well. He's always wanted what he thinks he's owed, but he never saw the cabin for what it was. The deed's filed, legal, and yours. There's a copy with Harold if you need it. Keep the family close, Merida, even when it's hard. I sat back on my couch, the letter trembling in my hands. Amos had known Ben might try something. He'd seen the jealousy I'd ignored, the way Ben bristled when Amos and I spent weekends together, sanding boards or planting herbs by the porch. The cabin wasn't just a place, it was Amos's legacy, and he'd chosen me to carry it. But Ben's lie, that forged letter, felt like a knife in the gut. How could he stand there, in front of everyone, and claim what wasn't his? My phone buzzed. A text from Ben. "Nice disappearing act. Don't worry, you can still visit the cabin if you ask nicely." The nerve of him. Anger flared, hot and sharp, but Amos's words echoed, "Keep the family close." I wouldn't confront him over text, that was too easy, too fleeting. This needed to be face-to-face, where the truth could breathe. I tucked the documents back into the box, grabbed my keys, and headed back to Charlotte. The party would still be going, and I had a wooden box full of truth to share. The drive back to Ben's Charlotte townhouse felt like wading through molasses, each mile heavy with the weight of what I was about to do. The wooden box sat on the passenger seat, its presence steadying me like Grandpa Amos's hand on my shoulder. I parked a block away, not wanting to announce my return just yet. I needed a moment to gather myself, to channel Amos's advice. The truth doesn't need to shout, Merida. It just needs to be clear. I whispered to the empty car, "What would you do, Grandpa?" The answer came like a breeze off Lake Lure. The right thing, with grace. I texted Maggie, "How many people are still there?" Her reply was quick, "Just family now. Most guests left after dessert. You coming back?" Perfect. I didn't need an audience for this. Just the people who mattered. Clutching the box, I walked to Ben's front door and knocked. He opened it, his smile fading to something wary. "Work emergency over already?" he asked, his tone dripping with doubt. "We need to talk, Ben," I said, brushing past him into the living room. Mom looked up, surprised, from where she was discussing cabin renovations with Lila. Dad was studying Ben's letter, his brow creased. Maggie sat quietly, her eyes flicking to me with a nod of encouragement. Merida's back, Mom said, a little too brightly. We were just talking about Ben's news about the cabin. Actually, I said, setting the wooden box on the coffee table. That's what I'm here about. Ben's gaze locked on the box, a flash of recognition crossing his face. What's that? He asked, but his voice betrayed he already knew. Something Grandpa gave me 3 weeks ago, I said, keeping my tone even. He told me not to open it until the time was right. I think that's now. Before Ben could interrupt, I opened the box and pulled out the notarized deed and Amos's letter. 6 months ago, Grandpa legally transferred the Lake Lore cabin to me. It's mine, not part of his estate. The room went still. Mom's jaw dropped. Dad picked up the deed, his eyes scanning it. This is notarized, he said, voice low. And that's Amos's signature. Ben stood frozen, his face paling. I held out my hand for his letter, and Dad passed it over. I laid it beside Amos's letter from the box. The difference was glaring. Ben's letter had a signature too smooth, too steady for Amos's arthritic hand. Ben, Mom said, her voice barely a whisper, did you forge this? His silence screamed louder than any confession. Lila stood, her face ashen. I need to go, she murmured, grabbing her purse and heading for the door. Ben called after her, Lila, wait, but the door shut with a finality that echoed through the room. The silence in Ben's living room was thick, like the air before a summer storm. Mom stared at the 2 letters side by side, her disappointment carving lines into her face. Dad's hand rested on the notarized deed, his jaw tight. Maggie watched from the corner, her quiet support a lifeline I clung to. Ben stood there, his shoulders slumped, the charm he'd worn all night gone like a mask torn off. I wanted to be angry, furious, even, but something in his eyes, a flicker of shame, made my heart twist. He was my brother, after all, even if he'd tried to steal what Grandpa Amos had given me. Ben, Mom said, her voice Wilson now, how could you do this? He didn't answer right away, just stared at the floor like it might swallow him up. Then, in a rush, it came out. It's not fair, he said, his voice cracking. Merida was always Grandpa's favorite. Always at the cabin, always his shadow. I was his grandson too, but I got nothing, no time, no stories, no anything. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not just jealousy but pain. I thought if I had the cabin, it'd mean I mattered to him. I blinked, stunned. You think I got everything? I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Then, you could have come to the cabin. Amos invited you all the time. You were the one who said no. His face flushed, a mix of anger and embarrassment. I felt like I didn't belong there, he shot back. You two had your thing, your projects, your talks. I was just the guy who showed up late and left early. Dad cleared his throat, his discomfort palpable. Ben, forging a letter, lying to us all, isn't just wrong. It's serious. Mom nodded, her eyes glistening. Why announce it like that, without even checking the truth? Ben's gaze dropped again. I found out last week, he admitted. I went to Amos's lawyer, asking about the estate. Thompson said the cabin was already handled, but he wouldn't say how. I knew it meant Merida got it. I made the letter that night. I thought if I said it first, maybe it'd stick. I felt a pang of pity, sharp and unexpected. Ben, the golden boy with the big deals and the flashy life, had been carrying this hurt all along. But pity didn't erase the sting of his betrayal. You thought I'd just let it go? I asked, my voice steady but cold. That I'd give up the one place that means everything to me? Ben didn't answer, just sank into a chair, the fight draining out of him. The air in Ben's living room felt heavy, like the weight of Grandpa Amos's absence had settled over us all. I looked at my brother, slumped in his chair, and felt the tug of something softer than anger, maybe not forgiveness, not yet, but a crack in the wall between us. Grandpa had always said family was like the lake, sometimes stormy, sometimes still, but always worth coming back to. I reached into the wooden box, my fingers brushing a sealed envelope I hadn't mentioned yet. Ben's name was scrawled across it in Amos's shaky script, the same handwriting that had penned my letter. "Grandpa left something for you too," I said, holding it out. Ben's eyes flicked up, suspicion warring with a flicker of hope. He took the envelope, hesitating before tearing it open. Mom leaned closer, her glasses slipping down her nose, while Dad watched, his face unreadable. Maggie gave me a small nod, like she knew this was what Amos would have wanted. Ben unfolded the letter, his hands unsteady, and handed it to Mom. "Read it," he said, his voice low. "Everyone should hear it." Mom adjusted her glasses and began, her voice soft but clear. "Dear Ben, if you're reading this, Merida's opened the box, which means the truth's out one way or another. I've known you since you were a boy, always chasing something bigger, something to prove you're enough. I wish I'd given you more of what you needed, but I see your heart. You act rashly when you feel left out, and that can hurt others, and you most of all. The cabin's Merida's, a choice I made because she loves it like I do. But this isn't about favorites. It's about paths. I've left you a check for $25,000. Use it to find what lights you up, like the cabin does for Merida. Maybe it's that real estate venture you talked about, or something else. Build something yours. The cabin's door is always open, but your future's in your hands. With love, Grandpa Amos." A tear slipped down Mom's cheek as she finished. Ben clutched the check, his knuckles white. "He knew," he whispered. "He knew I'd try something stupid." I swallowed hard, picturing Amos writing this, his hands trembling, but his mind sharp. He'd seen Ben's flaws, but loved him anyway. "He believed in you," I said, my voice catching. "He just wanted you to find your own way." Ben looked at me, his eyes raw, and for the first time in years, I saw my brother, not the rival, but the boy who'd once raced me to the lake's edge, laughing. The room felt smaller after Mom read Grandpa Amos's letter, like the walls were holding their breath. Ben sat with his head bowed, the check still in his hand, while Mom wiped her eyes with a napkin. Dad's face was a storm of emotions, disappointment, worry, maybe even guilt for not seeing Ben's hurt sooner. Maggie caught my eye, her expression soft but steady, like she was anchoring me through the chaos. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence, but my throat was tight with the weight of it all. Grandpa's words hung in the air, a reminder that he'd trusted me not just with the Lake Lure cabin, but with something bigger, keeping our family from fracturing. "Ben," Dad said finally, his voice heavy, "why didn't you talk to us? To Merida? You didn't have to do this." Ben didn't look up, just shook his head. "I don't know," he mumbled. I wanted to feel like I mattered to him." Mom reached for his hand, but he pulled away, the gesture small but sharp. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice breaking. "You mattered. You always did." But her words felt hollow against the truth we'd all just seen. Ben's lie had torn open old wounds, ones I hadn't even known were there. I thought of Amos, of the way he'd sit on the cabin's porch, whittling, telling me stories about Mom and Dad before their divorce, about Ben's first swim in the lake. He'd loved us all, but he'd seen me at the cabin, week after week, sanding floors, planting flowers, listening. Ben had chosen to stay away, but I hadn't realized how much that choice had hurt him. Now, with his lie exposed and Lila gone, he looked lost, like a kid who'd wandered too far from shore. Maggie stood, breaking the tension. "I'm heading out," she said, giving me a quick hug. "Call me tomorrow, Merida." Her whisper was a promise she'd be there when I needed to sort through this mess. Mom and Dad left soon after, casting worried glances at Ben, who stayed rooted to his chair. I lingered, not sure why. Maybe because Amos's letter had reminded me that family wasn't just about what we inherit, it's about what we choose to build, even after things break. As I stepped toward the door, the wooden box under my arm, I wondered if Ben and I could ever find our way back to the kids we'd been, racing to the lake under Amos's watchful eye. The drive to Lake Lure the next morning felt like a pilgrimage. The Blue Ridge Mountains rose around me, their peaks soft in the early light, guiding me to the cabin that was now mine. I pulled into the gravel driveway, the familiar crunch under my tires like a heartbeat. The cabin stood just as Grandpa Amos had left it, cedar siding weathered to a warm gray, emerald shutters framing the windows, the wide porch wrapping it like an embrace. I sat in my car, the wooden box on the seat beside me, and let the quiet sink in. This was home, more than my Asheville apartment ever could be. Inside, the air smelled of pine and faintly of Amos's pipe tobacco, a scent that lingered despite his years of quitting. Books were stacked on the side table, fishing rods lined up in the corner, everything exactly as he'd left it. I ran my fingers along the oak bookshelf, its edges worn smooth from years of use. Amos used to say this place was his sanctuary, built with his own hands after Grandma passed. Now it was mine, and the responsibility felt both heavy and sacred. I walked to the picture window, the lake sparkling below, its surface calm despite the storm in my heart. "I'm here, Grandpa," I whispered, my breath fogging the glass. "I'll keep it safe, I promise." My phone buzzed, pulling me back. A text from Maggie, "How's the cabin?" "Your mom called, Ben's a mess." I typed back, "Cabin's perfect." "Not sure about Ben yet." Another message followed. "He's been calling everyone, trying to explain. Your parents are still upset." I wasn't surprised. Trust, once cracked, doesn't heal overnight. Setting my phone down, I stepped onto the porch, the swing creaking under my weight. I could almost see Amos here, his baseball cap low, telling me how to spot a good piece of wood or why the lake's light was different at dawn. The cabin wasn't just a place, it was a keeper of memories, of lessons about resilience and love. 3 weeks later, Ben texted, "Can we talk at the cabin?" I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the reply. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep this place mine alone. But Amos's voice echoed, "Forgiveness is for you, Merida, not just them." I sent back a time and date, my heart heavy but open, ready to see if the cabin could hold us both. The morning Ben came to the cabin, I was on the porch swing, a mug of coffee warming my hands. The lake stretched out below, its surface catching the light like a mirror. When his sleek sedan pulled up, kicking up gravel, I felt a knot in my chest, part anger, part hope. Ben stepped out, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, his usual polish replaced by a worn flannel and tired eyes. "This place hasn't changed," he said, his voice soft as he scanned the cabin's familiar lines. "That's the point," I replied, nodding to the chair across from me. He sat, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on his knee. For a moment, we just listened to the lake's gentle lap against the shore, the same sound that had grounded me through countless talks with Grandpa Amos. "I've been trying to figure out what to say," Ben started, his voice low. "Everything feels not enough." "Try anyway," I said, my tone neutral, giving him space, but not absolution. He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the lake. "I'm sorry, Merida. Not just for the letter, but for all of it, being jealous, resenting you for what you had with Grandpa. I should have looked at my own choices instead of blaming you." His honesty caught me off guard, raw in a way I hadn't expected from my smooth-talking brother. "Why'd you do it, Ben?" "Really?" I asked, needing the truth stripped bare. He hesitated, then met my gaze. "I thought the cabin could make up for what I missed. Like owning it would bring me closer to him, to what you two had. It was stupid, I know." His voice cracked, and I saw the boy he'd been, the one who'd always wanted to be first, best seen. I leaned back, the swing creaking. "You could have had it too, you know. Amos invited you every summer." Ben nodded, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "I was too stubborn. Too proud." Then, quieter, "I'm trying to change that." I used his check, enrolled in a woodworking course. "I'm awful at it, but it's grounding. Like he said it would be." I softened, just a fraction. "He'd like that." We sat in silence, the lake's rhythm filling the space. Then I stood, motioning him inside to Amos's study. I unlocked the roll-top desk with the brass key from the box, pulling out a folder labeled Ben. Inside were clippings of his debate wins, photos of his graduation, even a printout of his big promotion. "He was proud of you," I said, my voice catching. "He just showed it his way." Ben's eyes glistened as he traced the pages, seeing a piece of Amos he'd never known. A week later, Ben came back to the cabin, his sleeves rolled up and a toolbox in hand. We stood on the dock, the late afternoon sun painting the lake gold, and planned repairs for the boathouse. I sketched ideas in a notebook while Ben tossed out suggestions, new shingles, maybe a fresh coat of paint. His enthusiasm felt new, like he was seeing the cabin for the first time. You know, he said, his feet dangling in the cool water, I think Grandpa knew what he was doing, giving you this place. I looked at him, the lake's reflection dancing in his eyes. What do you mean? He smiled, a real one, not the salesman's grin. You didn't just get a cabin, Merida. You got his job, keeping us connected, holding on to what matters. His words hit deep, echoing the weight I'd felt since opening that wooden box. Grandpa Amos hadn't just given me a deed. He'd trusted me to carry his legacy, to mend what was broken in our family, starting with the brother I'd almost lost to jealousy and pride. We spent the day sanding boards and hammering nails, the rhythm of the work pulling us closer. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully. Trust would take time, and I still carried the sting of his lie. But it was a start, a crack in the wall we'd built between us. As the sun dipped behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, I sat on the porch swing, the cabin's familiar creak of comfort. Ben joined me, a beer in hand, and we watched the lake settle into dusk. I'm gonna keep coming up, he said quietly. If that's okay. The door's open, I said, echoing Amos's words. Always has been. He nodded, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were siblings again, not rivals. The cabin stood behind us, its weathered walls holding decades of memories, Amos's laughter, our childhood summers, and now, this tentative new chapter. I thought of Grandpa, his hands steady as he taught me to carve wood, his voice urging me to hold the family close. He'd known this moment might come, and he'd prepared me for it, not with anger, but with grace. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with me through betrayal, truth, and the slow work of rebuilding. The Lake Lore Cabin isn't just a place, it's a promise to keep family close, even when it hurts. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and join us. Every creak of the porch swing, every ripple on the lake, tells a story of loss, love, and starting over. Keep building your own connections, and I'll meet you on the shore.